Hi, my name is Steve Goldberg, and as the first slide here says, we're going to take a look at what Raptor research looks like here at Research Triangle High School. So the first question you might ask is, why do we even cite sources? And a couple reasons I came up with are that readers might want to check our facts and find out more about a topic. But then it occurred to me that I might want to actually do some research and find out why some professionals say that we cite sources. So I looked online, and this is from the MIT Libraries page. You can click that link there, or look that link up, I suppose. It's hard to click a video. But they list 4 reasons. Show the reader that you've done proper research. So you list your sources, be a responsible scholar, give credit to others, avoid plagiarism, and allow your reader to track down the sources that you used by citing them accurately in your paper. And you want to use footnotes or a bibliography or a reference list. And this is where I think some of our students are currently not being as good at citation as they could be. So here's a really cool example. Actually, one of our math teachers had students write, which is awesome that we're having interdisciplinary writing across the curriculum happening. He had them write as an intro assignment, what's something that inspires you? And actually one of our students is inspired by the topic of black male incarceration. And you can read the paper that the student wrote, but if we scroll down a little bit, they have this quote that says there's always been a secret utopian dream that, quote, we don't want anyone to commit crime so we can remove our jails. But she doesn't say where this quote comes from. And then down here it quotes a statistic that $70 billion is spent on corrections yearly out of $200 billion the U.S. spends on public safety annually. And again, it would be really useful to know where that information came from. What the student does is at the end of the paper, they cite their sources, and there's Barnes and Criminal Justice Fact Sheet and Mulvaney and Quigley, but they've failed to do in-text citations, so it's impossible to tell where that quote came from and where that statistic comes from. And so they're really falling down on this one here. As a reader, I can't track down the sources I used, that the person used in writing the paper, because I can't tell what information came from what source. Now, I mentioned that paper during our professional development, but here's another example I just got from a student, and I had them in class do a free write, and they could pick any topic and learn about it, and this student learned about the assassination of William McKinley. And then they found out all this great information and found some pictures, and here's a mugshot of the person who killed McKinley, and this is great stuff. And then they ended with some really good questions, which I'm very excited about. But then they did the same thing, is just citing all the sources at the end here. And there's no thought to telling the reader where the different pieces of information came from. And we want to break students of this habit. So this is a sample research paper from Gallaudet University in Washington, D.C. And we'll look at the paper in a second. But one thing they say here is a good rule of thumb is, when in doubt, cite it. Cite all your quotes. Cite everything you paraphrase. Cite all information and facts you found from other sources. In short, you need to cite almost everything. Don't worry, you'll get used to it. We want our students to get used to it in high school as well. And then it goes on to, you can hit pause and read some of the details here about things you don't need to cite. So here's the sample paper, and they're saying things like, we now know that the hyperactive boy has a neurological disorder called attention deficit hyperactive disorder, ADHD. And their citation is actually 2 different sources, Hallowell and Rady and Latham, right? And then here's Hallowell and Rady for this next piece here. And then if you go through the paper, they're citing things such as Latham, 2000, and Booth, 1998. And when we scroll to the end and look at the works cited, here's Booth, and here's Latham, and here's Robertson, and these are the different things that they've cited in the paper, and so we can tell what information came from what source. And that's what we want to see our students doing. Here's a pretty weighty example, but this is the actual 9/11 Commission report. And we can see here, you can hit pause and read this, but it just describes the scene on a Tuesday morning, September 11th, 2011. There's no citations here because this is just regular description. There's nothing controversial, particularly about what the weather was like, and President Bush did go for an early morning run in Sarasota, Florida. But as we scroll down a little bit, we get to Atta and Omari, who they mentioned earlier up here, board a 6 a.m. flight from Portland to Boston's Logan International Airport. How do you know that? Well, they've cited source number 1 here. And as we go through, here's source number 2, and then here's source number 4. I must have missed source number 3, scrolling through quickly. We're up to 6. And if we scroll down a little bit, we're already up to sources 18 and 19, because they're talking about some pretty controversial stuff. And then when we look at the work cited at the end, this is a 500-page document. These are the notes to chapter 1. And here's note 1. It's actually pretty long. Here's note 2, note 3, note 4, note 5. And you can see that it goes on quite a bit because they want to be specific about where you got the information came from. This is the NTSB report from the air traffic control recording. And then in today's world, you could actually link with hyperlinks to some of these reports. And that's actually what the New York Times does. This is an article about EpiPen overpricing. And we'll scroll down here for a second. Here's the article. And it starts out by saying that Mylan, the maker of the allergy treatment EpiPen, said Friday it had reached a $465 million settlement with the Justice Department and other government agencies over questions on whether the company had overcharged Medicaid for the treatment by improperly classifying it as a generic drug. Now, these are links to the company Mylan and to the program Medicaid. But when they make the claim that the federal government said this week that Mylan had been told multiple times it was wrongly classifying the EpiPen, which led the Medicaid and Medicare programs to overpay for the product, what's their evidence for that? Well, if you click on this link, it takes you to another New York Times article. And I'll just go ahead and click that. But then, yeah, well, you can't see the whole thing because of the layout here. But this is to an article written on September 2nd, 2016 that backs up that claim. And then similarly, Mylan made a statement, and you click on this, and it's a link to the actual statement from Mylan. So when you click that link, it brings up the actual PR piece from Mylan's website. So this was that statement, and then down here, this is to an issue that surfaced over the summer. This is a link to an earlier article in the New York Times. So I think that's a fine way to cite if students want to do in text citations, but then at the end of the article, they should, at the end of their paper, they should list all the resources that they've used. And so however they do it, we want to make sure that students are doing these 4 bullet points here that we talked about earlier. And this is also from the MIT library webpage, and they talk about how there's no one standard citation style at MIT, and we, I suppose, are emulating MIT because we also do not currently have one standard citation style. It depends what you're doing. If you're doing humanities, you probably use MLA. Sometimes you use APA. There's also the Chicago style. There's the American Chemical Society. There's the Council of Biology Editors, the CBE. There's the IEEE. There's the NLM. You get the idea. And so you want to just make sure that students are adhering to those basic principles that are outlined. And since this is a video about research and citation, it seems appropriate to end it by citing the sources that I showed here in the video. And if you scroll down a little bit, it talks about how we're just like MIT, and if you click this link, it takes you to the various standards that folks can use for citing in the different disciplines. And again, because it's hard to click on links in a video, you can get to this document where you can click all those links yourself by going to bit.ly, capital R, Raptor, capital R, research, and that'll get you this whole program, which I hope is useful to you as you work with students throughout this year here at RTHS. Thanks for watching.